What did your friend do that accidentally turned you on? I was off from college for about a week. I came back and a friend of mine who I hung out with every day ran up and hugged me. But as she hugged me, she jumped and wrapped her legs around me, and we were just looking at each other. Should have just went for it, but alas, I only realized after the fact months later. If I could go back in time, I'd punch myself in the balls. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. We were sitting on her couch watching Thor Ragnarok, finished our Chinese food, and she went and got a pint of Ben & Jerry's out of her freezer. She sat sideways half on my lap and took turns taking a bite and feeding me a bite. It was oddly intimate, but she'd made it clear that she was convinced if we started to date, we would end up married, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that. 6 months later, we were dating. 6 months after that, we were married. Coming up on our 2-year anniversary now. Story 3. I was once speaking to this customer and I couldn't understand her because of her thick Russian accent. So my coworker stepped in and started speaking fluent Russian, and I swear it was the hottest thing ever. I definitely have a thing for accents because that was putting me in some type of mood. I can't tell if OP did this just for the pun or not. Did this actually happen? Story 4. I had a friend lick my face as a joke because she was one of those girls that thought they were quirky or different for acting like a weirdo or something. It was like freshman year of high school if I recall correctly. It was definitely strange as hell, but Jesus, did she awaken something in me. I wasn't even particularly attracted to her. I was just licked and I felt the arousal creeping in. And I'm just standing there like, oh God, oh please don't, oh no. Story 5. This was 5 years back in high school. A female friend and I were putting a group together for a science project. We met up at her place after school, because no one was home and she didn't want to drive over to my place. As I was sitting on my laptop and reading, she scratched my forearm with her nails to get my attention. Man, her look in her eyes and the scratches, I still remember that. Story 6. We were both drunk at a friend's house party, and I playfully pulled her hair to get her attention. She gasped and then gave a happy little moan. What made it hotter was the way she gripped the seat of her chair with both hands and encouraged me to do it again. So I ended up playing with her hair all night. I still think about her gorgeous, bliss-filled face, though sadly we never took it any further. Story 7. Probably wasn't accidental, but I was drinking with a friend of mine one night and she was complaining about her boyfriend at the time. I had always been interested in her, but also I respected it when she got into relationships, even though I didn't really like this guy she was with. She said she was going to go to bed and that I could crash on the couch since I had been drinking. She started stretching in front of me and said that she always stretches before bed. Now, I wouldn't have questioned this, but she was sticking her butt right in my face, and she was getting into some pretty suggestive poses on the floor. She went to bed and the next day thanked me for letting her vent. A lot of people told me she was trying to bang and I should have went for it. But she had been drinking and had a boyfriend, so there were 2 red flags right there. So I didn't even try. Story 8. He still does this. He takes my shopping bags and puts his hand on my back as we cross streets. I'm short and I have a limp, and he's so kind and caring about it. Edit. Quick FAQ. I asked him out 3 times now, about 2 years apart each time. I was very politely rejected. We are great friends and I'm happy with that. He's a joy to have in my life. The limp is from a very serious injury I had a few years back. I'm not actually a grandma, but I do love tea and crochet, so make of that what you will. I'm not abnormally short, I'm just regular can't reach the top shelf and my feet don't touch the floor from chairs short. He's worried jerks and giant pickups won't see me, and he's not wrong. I've had a lot of near misses. Story 9. We were neighbors. She just kicked out her ex-BF and we lost power due to an ice storm. The power was restored later, but her heat wasn't working right. She called it in, but the maintenance people were busy with calls to fix heat in other units too. We were hanging out at my place watching movies and basking in my heat, though it was still chilly. So we were sharing a blanket on the couch, snuggled up together and drinking whiskey. She passed out on the couch, so I put an extra blanket on her and went to my room. About 1 hour later, she walks into my room and just falls in a bed next to me, gets under the covers, snuggles up to me, then says, "I'm cold," and then passes out. I don't know, maybe I felt wanted that she came to me for comfort. We didn't hook up or anything though. The next morning she woke up and she made me breakfast and went back to her apartment to get her heat fixed. Story 10. We were going to a picnic with our classmates. This was in 10th grade. I'm doing second year of college now. And we were in this deluxe gigantic bus. We actually played hide and seek in the bus. Anyway, so while we were playing, I crossed my legs and sat down under one of the seats. And a female friend of mine came to the same spot and asked if she could hide with me. I agreed and she lied down and placed her head on my lap, but her head was exactly, It kinda turned me on, but I was trying really hard not to have a hard-on and creep her out. Luckily, my efforts were not in vain. I still keep in touch with her and actually mentioned this to her a few months before COVID hit. She admitted that she knew where she was, but didn't want to move because she thought that it would make me feel awkward. We had a good chuckle and we're still friends. OP, you couldn't have possibly thought that she didn't know where her head was, right? Cause, like, how would she not know is kind of where I'm at. I feel like if I were to put my head in someone's lap, I wouldn't. Okay, actually, never mind. Story 11. A friend of mine used to sit on my lap when we'd run out of chairs hanging out with friends, and she'd move her hips to find a comfy spot, but god damn it was hard on me, to find a way that my little John wouldn't poke her in the butt. Which did happen a few times, which would be followed by her giving me the smile and shifting just a little more and saying something coy. Another time was when we were hanging out while I had a really loose tooth. She was getting annoyed at me pushing at it with my tongue, so she pushed me to my bed, straddled me, and reached her hand in my mouth to tear my tooth out. From the sounds being made, my groaning, and my bed shaking, my dad came up to make sure we were all right. Then saw us sweaty, her on top of me, face right up to mine, and thought we were about to do it. After that, she used that as a distraction enough to yank my tooth out. I had to go downstairs to stop the bleeding and managed to explain to him what happened, to which he looked mildly disappointed, and I think his headcanon to this day is that I banged her, or at least some light over-the-clothes action. I can't remember when I stopped losing teeth, but OP, how old are you here? Because I don't... Like, if I had to guess, it was like 12 I lost my last tooth. Or is that really early? Maybe I'm wrong. Story 12. Not very subtle, but she spontaneously pulled her pants down to tan her legs while we were chilling outside. When she suggested doing it, I was like, oh sure, assuming she had shorts on underneath. Ha, nope. Victoria's Secret. I laughed and said, dude, we're outside. But in truth, God, I was turned the hell on. She wasn't the brightest friend, but that's what made hanging out with her so fun. Story 13. I was having a drink with an old friend a long time ago. At a point, after a brief pause, she just looked at me, smiled, and said, "You're very handsome, you know." It got a little quiet, awkward, and we carried on drinking and chatting, and soon it was like nothing had happened. But from that moment on, I never failed to notice the striking blue of her eyes, and my feelings became slightly complicated and conflicted. It didn't last, of course, just bizarre how a compliment can change a perception, especially for us men who receive so few. We barely speak anymore. We're both married and she has a son. Of course, I love my wife with all I have and all I am. But there's always that memory. I've never forgotten it and imagine I never will. Story 14. Not a friend per se, but a random stranger. I was checking out at a drugstore. I gave my phone number for the reward system, and immediately we started chatting about where we were from. Turns out we grew up about 40 miles or so from each other, and discussed what it's like being so far from home. When she handed me my change back, we held hands for a few seconds too long, and that is probably the closest thing to intimacy I felt in a very, very long time. Story 15. Former coworker on base, close to 18 years ago, had been trying for an entire year to get into better shape. She had always been pretty, but just wasn't happy with what the mirror showed her. A year of swimming, running, and lightweight training later, and holy crap. I was talking to her and she stretched arms above her head and her sweater lifted up to her ribcage, showing all that glorious real estate down to the hip bones. Apologies, ma'am, but I may have had many impure thoughts about said real estate since. Side note, we were not very interested in each other romantically, so no, this wasn't a sending messages kind of gesture. Story 16. I was the friend. She had hosted a party with our friends. We had been on the same beer pong team for a bit, and I had jokingly given her a hard time about missing some shots. To which she responded by saying that she'll slap me. An inside joke, it wouldn't have been hard. I stared at her and she raised her hand to do so, and while maintaining my gaze, I quickly grabbed her by the wrist and held on for a second before letting go. She quite literally said, "That turned me on," and asked if I heard what she said. I said, "Yeah," and continued playing. Story 17. I found restraints on his bedposts from an encounter with an ex and made fun of him. Then asked him how they work. Instead of telling me, he proceeded to put the ankle restraints on me and threw my legs over his neck and showed different ways he could bang me. I've known this dude since I was a kid and he's family to me, but I instantly wanted to drop my panties and say, screw our childhood. Let's ruin a friendship. So that's how I found my kink in college. Story 18. We were in some math class in high school and she was tutoring me mid-class. She was leaning over next to me as I was sat down and she had her hand on my back. She was almost whispering into my ear how to figure out this problem. Something about her voice was so soothing and arousing. It was very sensual and I still think often about it. Nothing ever happened with her. We grew apart after school. Something very similar happened at my job recently though, so it brought me back. Brought you back or brought you up, OP? Story 19. 3 years ago, we were once on a school trip and we went into the woods. and I went with my other friends into the deep woods. We were all boys, and we got a little lost. She went out alone to look for me, and when she found me, she just hugged me and whispered in my ear, "God damn it, don't do this again. What the hell would I have told your parents?" And my dumb butt just laughed and shrugged and pretended like my heart didn't explode that day. Well, anyway, 3 years later, I confessed, and I'm sleeping beside her right now, and she has no idea I'm writing this. Story 20. Guy here, senior year of high school. A guy dares me to give a massage to my girl best friend when she sits down. She sits down, I start giving her a shoulder massage, which I'm told I'm very good at, and she lets out a couple of soft moans and completely relaxes. I had never really been attracted to her until then. Then I stopped and she slumped back, tilted her head back so I was looking at her upside down, and she said, "Don't stop." So, that was some feelings I felt. Edit. Since this got a fair number of views, nothing ended up coming out of it. She had a boyfriend at the time who was jealous of me for quite some time, according to her. We haven't talked much in recent years, but we're having dinner and catching up either this week or the next. I have feelings for her, but I'm not sure those feelings are strong enough / worth ruining our 18+ year friendship for. Story 21. Moved into an apartment where my roommate was one of my best friends who happened to be a girl. Completely platonic relationship for 12 years at that point. 6 months later, I'm stoned out of my mind as per usual when I get home from work late at night, and she asked me to lay down in her bed with her because she had woken up from a nightmare. So I laid down on top of the blanket and she fell asleep. I had intended to get up and go into my own room and watch cartoons with the rest of my high, but I ended up getting comfy and falling asleep. The next morning, she woke me up by lightly scratching on my back. But little did she know that nails on my back are an instant turn on. Never had any feelings for each other, never did anything remotely physical, nothing, just boom. Instant wood. Jokingly told her to cut it out or it's gonna get awkward. And she didn't know what I meant at first until I rolled over and she saw the tent. We discussed the idea of us being together or even just casual banging between friends, and 1 year later, I wifed her. No regrets. Not a single letter. Married my best friend because she accidentally turned me on. Story 22. When I worked in a restaurant, the head chef was the type who was very particular. His way was always right and he was bossy. But he was also super nice / funny, so it balanced out. He essentially just had a very dominant personality. I would call the garlic toast garlic bread because I didn't see much of a difference, and while we were rushing, that's the name that would come out of my mouth. It was kind of our thing to bicker back and forth. We had fun and laughed with it, and it never had any actual tension. But one day I yell for some garlic bread. He's holding it in his tongs and is about to give it to me when he says, "Call it garlic toast. I want to hear you say it." So I start giggling and say, "Okay, chef," to which he once again says in a very dominant way, "No, say it." Once I cracked and laughed, then said it, he smiled and said, "Good girl." Y'all, the sub in me has never been happier. Guys, I have a feeling that she is not talking about subreddits, right? Story 23. Around 2002-ish, I was playing Counter-Strike on my computer, when suddenly my next-door neighbor girl just came into my room and sat on my lap. While hugging and breathing down my neck, I'm sure she could feel my growing enthusiasm. After a lot of deaths, I finally decided to quit the game and just hug back. After a while, I started to wonder if she had fallen asleep or something. Turns out that she just had a bad day and all she needed was a hug, but that breathing down my neck, ooh, yes. Story 24. This one's a little on the nose, but there was this girl I was hanging out with just after graduating high school. She had a boyfriend, but we were good friends. We were roughhousing, pushing each other around one day, and I pushed her a little too hard to the floor. I knelt over her to see if she was okay, and through her messed up hair covering half her face, she whispered, "Just screw me already." It is the hottest thing I've ever experienced to this day, a decade later. I guess I accidentally turned her on by pushing her too hard. Story 25. This is a girl I've slept with a few times and not just a friend, so I'm not sure if this fits. Once I, 24M at the time, invited myself to her, 22F, and her friend's girls' night to watch The Bachelor. And it was everything a girls' night should be. Various snacks, extended couch with seemingly thousands of pillows, blankets and plushies, white wine, pajamas. We ordered McDonald's and talked trash about all the girls on the show simping for that one totally overrated guy. But the girl in question, the one I had occasional hookups with, was wearing a unicorn onesie as pajamas. Nothing special, nothing obviously frisky at all. If anything, it looked comfortable as hell. But something about it made me go crazy. All I could think about was her in that onesie. I even suggested a few times for her to wear it in bed, mostly packed in some kind of joke. We always laughed it off, but I don't think she realizes I'm way more serious than I'd admit. Story 26. So I'm friends with a girl who does judo at a national level, and we get along like a house on fire. And we have a day mooching around town, going to coffee shops, etc. And then we go back to her place whilst we wait for, to be honest, I don't remember. My parents, maybe? So anyway, her house is in the final stages of a do-over, and she set up one of the rooms with her judo mats, and she asks if she can practice some throws on me. I agree. I am swiftly pummeled into the floor multiple times, and I don't know if it was the close contact or if it was the pummeling, but I am super into it. And there are genuinely a couple of times where I think about kissing her, or making some other move at least, but I chicken out. Didn't want to ruin the friendship. I walk away with some small bruises, a bit of a hard-on, and months later, the realization that, wait, was she trying to make a move on me? Years later, I still can't tell. Story 27. We were at a house party with some friends, and the setting was quite cozy because we were sitting outside by the fire. One of my friends was a girl who I knew was attractive, but I didn't look at her in that way, not at that time. It was when it started to get chilly outside and she chose to get inside that flipped the script. I was standing by the sliding door, so there was a narrow space to pass. She came from behind while I was facing another friend I was talking to, gently held my waist with both hands, but slightly low, right by the frontal pelvis area. Boy, when I told you the temperature rose outside, I am not kidding. When I turned around, I didn't see her anymore. I saw a beautiful, gentle, soft woman. She smiled and asked to pass to get inside. I just froze like I didn't understand words. I swear if words had come out, I would have said something like, "But where are you going? I can't live without you." Story 28. I was sleeping at my friend's house one night and she didn't have a separate bed or mattress, so had to share the same bed. She was sound asleep at that time and I just put down my phone. She turned around in her sleep and spooned me out of nowhere. We weren't even close at that time, but damn, it felt good. It was also my first time getting spooned. We're both girls, by the way. 10 out of 10? Would recommend. I was already thinking of what to say. I was like, oh, you obviously were close if she let a guy stay over, but no, both girls. Fair enough. Surprise lesbians. Or at least one of them is interested in girls. We don't know if OP's friend is. Story 29. Girl sitting in front of me in high school English class was flirty and gorgeous, and had a line of guys who would practically do anything she asked just to get her attention. I was one of those idiots. She broke her pencil one day in class, turned around and gazed at me and asked ever so sweetly to go sharpen her pencil for her. Girl behind me I'd known since 3rd grade grabbed me by my collar and held me in my seat. She looked at the girl in front of me and told her to go sharpen her own damn pencil. She then gently patted me on the back and went right back to doing her work. I have never been so turned on in my life. Story 30. Almost a decade ago now. I just moved into my second apartment in college and ended up rooming with a girl I knew in high school. I'm male. I forget what it was I did, but I annoyed the hell out of her while I was sitting on a couch talking to one of her friends. She was so mad, she flung herself at me, straddle-mounted me, and reared back and slapped the ever-loving crap out of me 3 to 5 times. Everyone was shocked for a few seconds and silent, until I, in a shaky voice, asked her to do it again. We got married last year. Story 31. A girl I worked with at the time. I was the only guy employed at our store, and she would be scheduled to float back and forth between my department and another. On a random Sunday, she stayed almost an entire shift in my department. A rarity because I was the only guy and all the other workers were friends. We spent the whole day talking, and she would stop what she was doing to look at me and to listen when we were talking about things that were important to us. Towards the end of the day, she came to my register to check out, and had to remind me to ask her for her phone number for her rewards count. Dumb me didn't catch it and started explaining that I usually asked after ringing everything up. So she wrote it down and told me to keep it, but with one of those lip-biting smiles. Been together almost 3 years now and plan on getting married.